Sarah, and we're joined now by Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, MEP, who is in Glasgow. Thank you for being with us. Mrs May has said she's going to consult you on what's going on in Brexit. Have you had those discussions yet?
I had a brief telephone conversation with her yesterday. I have had several conversations with the Prime Minister over the past couple of years, but the pattern has tended to be that she's said she wants to consult. I've given her suggestions, attempts at compromise, and she's ignored practically everything that has been said to her. So, you know, we don't need more empty promises of consultation. We need the reality of it. And actually what we need now is decisive action from the House of Commons today to rule out no deal decisively for all time, and then tomorrow to vote to request an extension that is long enough, in my view, to allow this issue to go back to the people in another referendum. So that's what is urgent now.
Do you think Mrs May should step down as Prime Minister, bearing in mind she's lost these two votes by massive majorities?
Yes, but the conventional rules of politics are not applying right now. If they were, I think she would be out of office. I think her whole government would be out of office. You know, there's no point in being anything other than blunt about this. The Prime Minister has presided over the biggest failure of politics, negotiation, diplomacy, governance of our lifetimes. And the result of that is that we're getting close now to 3 years on from the Brexit referendum, and yet companies like the one I'm visiting today in Glasgow have no idea of the trading environment they'll be operating in just 16 days' time. It is utterly unforgivable. But the focus now has to be on finding a way out of this and doing that with no further delay, which is why the votes today and tomorrow in the House of Commons are so important.
Now, the SNP is supporting the amendment put forward, Amendment A, by Caroline Spelman, Oliver Letwin, Nick Bowles and others today. Is that right? You'll be voting in favour of that, against no deal?
We will vote against no deal and we will vote for whatever makes that most unequivocal. You know, the government motion that the Prime Minister read out in the Commons last night tries to face two ways at once, which, you know, perhaps shouldn't surprise us given the actions of this government over the past couple of years, but that's no longer acceptable. There has to be a decisive, unequivocal, for all time vote in the House of Commons today to take no deal off the table. And then on an extension vote tomorrow, we'll be voting for an extension, but it's really important here that the House of Commons doesn't just request an extension for a short period of time that would allow the deadlock to continue and push the cliff edge just a little bit further down the line. There has to be an extension long enough to allow this to go back to the people. Parliament has failed, completely failed to come to a decision here. So if Parliament can't decide, the people must be given that opportunity.
So that would mean you would like to see European Parliament elections in May in the UK?
If that is what is required, then yes. You know, we have to get away from the farcical pantomimes of politics that we've witnessed in recent days and weeks and get down to some hard-headed reality. The UK is not ready to leave the EU in 2 weeks' time. It's certainly not ready to do so without a deal, and it is not desirable that it does so. So it has to get back from that cliff edge, and then it has to work out where it wants to go and accept the realities of what that involves. And if that means making sure that we've got representatives elected in the European Parliament, then yes, that is something that should be accepted. You know, we've indulged the Brexit extremists long enough. The Prime Minister has certainly indulged them long enough. It's time for some honesty, for some frankness and for some common sense in what happens now.
Now, some of the people that your MPs are working with today, they want to move to what they call Common Market 2.0, leaving, or Norway plus, leaving the European Union but staying in a close trade relationship. Will the SNP MPs be backing that as well?
Well, let me just set out clearly our position and remind you, first of all, that I spent about 2 years trying to suggest such a compromise. The Scottish Government published papers suggesting such a compromise, and they were completely dismissed, not just by the Government but by Labour as well. So because we got nowhere with that, we came to the conclusion that putting this issue back to the people in a second referendum was the best way forward, and that is what I believe to be the case. So that is our priority, and we will vote for that over anything else. Of course, if there is no way of securing that, and if it's a choice between leaving the EU with no deal or staying in the single market customs union, the latter would be preferable. But I think for the moment anyway, we've gone beyond that, and this is now about putting this issue back to the people in a referendum.
And where do you think this leaves that other push for another referendum, the independence referendum in Scotland? We've heard a lot of complaints about Scotland being ignored in the House of Commons. Is it time to put that question back to the people of Scotland?
Well, Scotland has been ignored. Our vote to remain has been ignored. Every attempt at compromise has been ignored. You know, yesterday we had the absurd situation where a handful of DUP MPs had more sway over the future of Scotland than our national parliament did. And of course then there's the long-term consequences of Brexit if it happens. My priority has been trying, as First Minister, to protect Scotland as much as possible. But if Scotland is to be taken out of the EU against our will, there is a mandate in Scotland, won at 2 elections now, to give people the choice of independence. And when we get to the end of this chaotic phase of negotiations, which I hope is very soon, then I will set out how I intend to exercise that mandate.
Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, thank you very much indeed for joining us.